So this is the first lesson on participles, which is a verbal. Okay, verbals are a class of phrases where we're going to have verbs that act like different parts of speech. So we're going to have that expression. So this whole thing is going to be one part of speech, but within the verbal, that verb can take adverbs and prep phrases and other modifiers inside of it. So we're going to have to look at how does it act as a unit, and then what is going on inside of it. So the definition of a participle is an ed or an ing verb acting like an adjective. So that means it's still going to answer our key questions of which kind and which one when it is modifying nouns and pronouns. So our first kind is a present participle, which is a verb that ends in ing. So when I read this sentence, the smiling graduate posed for the photographer. For the photographer is a prep phrase. There's nothing inside that prep phrase that looks like an ing verb. It could be, but there isn't, so I'm going to cross it off. Posed is my action verb. Who or what posed? The graduates did. What kind of graduates? Smiling graduates. Smiling tells me about graduates, but in a different sentence, smiling could be the verb. In the next one, standing and applauding, the audience cheered the musical's cast. No prep phrases. Cheered is an action verb. Who or what did we cheer? Who or what cheered? The audience. The audience cheered what? Cast, direct object. Musicals happens to be an adjective. Here are my ing words. Well, standing and applauding aren't actions in the sentence. They're descriptions of what kind of audience. The audience standing and applauding. Which audience? The one standing and applauding. All of this is true when we talk about past participles, which end in ed. For dinner, we prepared grilled salmon, baked potatoes, and tossed salad. For dinner, prep phrase. Prepared is my action verb. Who or what prepared? We did. What did we prepare? Salmon, potatoes, salad, all direct objects. And then when we think about what kind of salmon, grilled, what kind of potatoes, baked, which kind of salad, tossed. Again, grilled, baked, and tossed could be verbs in different situations, but here they tell me more about the noun. Now in this last sentence, we have something tricky. Remember, in English, we have irregular verbs. Much like in Spanish, not all of our verbs are ed in the past tense. So when we first look at this sentence, 4 years as a prep phrase, the treasure had remained hidden under tons of fallen rock. Under tons of fallen rock. Had remained is my verb, and remained is kind of a weird one, so I'm just going to say verbed right now. Who or what had remained? Treasure. Now hidden is en, and many English irregular verbs are en in the past tense. Hidden can be a verb, excuse me, but in this case, hidden is a predicate adjective. It is a participle because it is describing the treasure. And then, and this is why I say don't obliterate your prep phrases, fallen tells me more about which rock, because fallen is a past tense conjugation. We don't say falled, we don't say hided. Hidden and fallen are those past tense forms, but they're irregular. So just watch out for some of the irregular. They're not all en, some have other weird forms, but remember ed, it's the past tense form of the verb, which may or may not be ed. So just as a final kind of warning before we go on to participial phrases. Be sure that you are identifying that simple subject and your verb phrase, because it's very tempting to mark anything with an ed or an ing as a participle. So in fact, when I look at this first sentence, the shrimp gumbo simmering on the stove smelled delicious. Here, smelled is a linking verb. Who or what smelled? The gumbo did. Linking verb, smelled what? Delicious. There's my predicate adjective. Simmering on the stove, simmering is describing the gumbo. On the stove is a prep phrase telling me more about the simmering. So this whole thing is actually a participle phrase, which we'll get to in a minute. But compare that to the sentence, the shrimp gumbo was simmering on the stove. Here on the stove gets crossed off, and was simmering is your action verb for the subject gumbo. So these two sentences say the same thing differently in their structure. So participle phrases is really the participle plus its modifiers. What does that mean? It means there can be adverbs in there and there can be prep phrases in there, because at the heart of that expression, the participle is a verb. So for example, climbing the tree, the monkey disappeared into the branches. Well, into the branches is a prep phrase. Disappeared is my action verb. Who or what disappeared? The monkey did. Climbing is my present participle, and I'm left with the tree. And so some of this you have to do by instinct. Does the tree tell me more about climbing, or does it tell me more about the monkey? Well, the comma also tips me off. Climbing the tree, the entire idea, that entire expression, tells me about the monkey. And so this is your participial phrase. If I look at this next one, I heard him whispering to his friend. To his friend. The action here is heard. Action verb. Who or what heard? I did. And I heard what? I heard him. Direct object. Whispering is your participle. Now, to his friend. Does to his friend tell you more about whispering, or does it tell you more about him? Well, of course it completes this meaning of whispering to his friend, and all of that is describing him. So you really need to use the comprehension element when you're figuring out where does a phrase end. We'll look at a couple more examples. So we watched the storm blowing eastward. So my action verb is watched. Who or what watched? We did. What did we watch? We watched the storm. Here's my participle. What does eastward do? Well, eastward tells me where it was blowing. Blowing eastward as a unit tells me about the storm. So that whole thing is your phrase. Voted back into office, the mayor thanked her supporters. Action verb. Who thanked? Mayor. Mayor thanked what? Supporters. Direct object. Everything here is accounted for. Voted, there's my ed. Back into office. Now, does that tell you more about mayor or supporters, or does that help clarify or expand on voted? Again, comma tips you off. Prep phrase, voted back into office is one unit of thought. Vote is your participle. Voted where? Back. Back where? Into office. All of that modifies voted. The whole thing then tells you about mayor as a unit. The concert scheduled for tomorrow at the park has been postponed until next week. Prep phrases for tomorrow at the park. Has been postponed is my action verb. Who or what has been postponed? Concert. Now, I mentioned in class I like to mark my subject and my action verb because they provide fences. Participles cannot contain, participial phrases cannot contain the action verb or any verb or the subject. So scheduled is obviously my participle. So what do I do for tomorrow? Well, for tomorrow tells me when it's scheduled. At the park tells me where it's scheduled for. I hit my action verb. This is my participial phrase. If you didn't have your action verb marked, you might be tempted to continue underlining to the end of the sentence. So just a quick hint, if you find that participial phrase at the beginning of the sentence, it will be set off by a comma. Good luck with your grammar homework.